Number 7. Grant Robichaux. Orthopedic surgeon Grant Robichaux appeared on a 2014 episode of the reality television series Online Dating Rituals of the American Male, which chronicled his search for a girlfriend. 2 years later, the 38-year-old reportedly matched with a math and physics teacher named Lauren Hayden on Tinder. The California surgeon invited the woman over for dinner at his luxury Newport Beach apartment. Hayden would later report that she'd intended to keep their first date purely platonic. However, within hours of her arrival at his home, Robichaux made repeated attempts to remove her clothes, prompting the woman to cry out for help. An elderly neighbor was awoken by her screams and contacted the police. Hayden had narrowly escaped the encounter without being harmed any further, but it would later emerge that she hadn't been the first woman assaulted by Robichaux. At his apartment in 2018, the wealthy surgeon and his girlfriend, Sarissa Riley, were arrested for drugging and abusing at least 7 women. Orange County authorities suspected that there might have been tens or hundreds more victims that had been targeted by the couple. During a search of Robichaux's Newport Beach residence, investigators found a substantial number of videos that showed the man performing non-consensual acts with women who'd been chemically sedated. As of the latest updates on the case, Robichaux and Riley were still awaiting their criminal trial. Number 6. Jonathan Brooks. On January the 14th of 2021, retired plastic surgeon Graham Perks was stabbed by an intruder during a break-in at his home in Northamptonshire, England. The 65-year-old was left with critical injuries to his chest and abdomen, and he consequently spent time recovering in an intensive care unit, while investigators set out to identify his attacker. Within a few days, local police arrested plastic surgeon Jonathan Brooks, who'd previously worked alongside Perks at the Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust. Brooks was charged with attempted murder, attempted arson with intent to endanger life, and possession of a knife in a public place. The Southwell-based surgeon denied having had any involvement in the stabbing of his former colleague and pleaded not guilty to his charges during a hearing at Nottingham Crown Court. While gathering evidence against Brooks, the authorities struggled to determine a potential motive for the brutal attack. Investigators then learned that in 2016, the 56-year-old had appeared before an employment tribunal at Nottingham University Hospital that Perks had helped oversee. After having expressed concerns about poor working conditions at the hospital, Brooks was reportedly seeking approximately $6.5 million in compensation from the institution's trust. The panel ultimately rejected Brooks's claim, and shortly thereafter, he lost his position at Nottingham University to work with the charity Doctors Without Borders. Information released in the aftermath of his arrest indicated that Brooks's criminal trial had been scheduled to begin on April the 4th of 2022. Number 5. Carlos Hernandez Fernandez. Colorado man Carlos Hernandez Fernandez was taken into police custody in August of 2016 after pretending to be a medical doctor for over a year. The 36-year-old was arrested by an officer who'd entered his Denver clinic reportedly while an unauthorized procedure was being performed. Although Fernandez had actually only attained the level of a surgical assistant, he posed as a cosmetic surgeon and performed multiple operations on unsuspecting women who'd believed him to be a legitimate doctor. It was reported that at least 4 women had suffered serious bodily harm as a direct result of the man's unlicensed procedures. According to Denver's district attorney, Fernandez had been running his deceptive surgical clinic since early 2015, and he consequently faced 14 felony counts, including second-degree assault, unlawful contact, and criminal impersonation. In April of 2017, he reached a plea deal that reduced his charges to just 3 counts. Fernandez was ultimately sentenced to 6 years in prison, followed by 15 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay approximately $190,000 to the victims of his illegal operations. Number 4. Neri Carvajal Gonzalez. In early 2014, South Florida woman Neri Carvajal Gonzalez agreed to perform a series of cosmetic surgeries on an unidentified man, even though she wasn't reported as being a licensed medical practitioner. The patient, described as being in his 50s, initially sought to have work done only on his face, but he eventually decided to have additional procedures for various other body parts, including his manhood. The The surgery was performed at a warehouse in Hialeah, an area known to local authorities as a hotspot for sham doctors offering cheap cosmetic procedures. Following the operation, the patient's organ failed to function properly, and it was also reported that he'd begun experiencing excruciating pain in his genital region. Embarrassed by his predicament and fueled by a sense of urgency, he went back to Carvajal Gonzalez, hoping she'd mend the issue. The latter called upon plastic surgeon Mark Schreiber to help fix the damage caused by the botched procedure. Schreiber had formerly worked at the Plastic Surgery Arts Center in Boynton Beach, but had lost his medical license in 2008. Around that same time, he'd been sentenced to 2 years in prison for charges related to practicing medicine without a license. After the patient had started questioning the legitimacy of his doctor's credentials, Carvajal Gonzalez fled to Colombia. In August of 2015, she returned to South Florida, at which point she was arrested and charged with unlicensed health care, causing serious injury and practicing without a medical license. The woman ultimately agreed to a deal with prosecutors that sentenced her to 40 months in prison, plus an additional 3 years of probation. Under the conditions of her plea agreement, Carvajal Gonzalez agreed to testify against Schreiber, who also faced criminal charges in connection to the incident. Number 3. Matthew Bonano. In August of 2019, a plastic surgeon from the village of Great Neck on Long Island, New York, was arrested after local authorities had been alerted to threats that he'd made against his estranged ex-wife and her family. The police took 47-year-old Matthew Bonano into custody outside of a bar in Tuckahoe, where he'd allegedly told one of his friends about his intention to shoot his former partner. Officers found a fully loaded handgun inside of his friend's car, and the surgeon was subsequently taken to police headquarters for further questioning. While Bonano was in custody, investigators were dispatched to the man's Great Neck apartment, where they came upon a cache of weapons, ammunition, and specialized equipment. The stash included rifles, tasers, military-style knives, brass knuckles, and body armor. Dozens more weapons were found at the Mount Pleasant home belonging to the man's parents, as well as in his car, which was reportedly parked outside of his ex-wife's residence. Bonano wasn't formally charged for the threat against his former partner, but he did ultimately face several weapons charges, including 11 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the second and third degrees. In 2021, it was reported that the former plastic surgeon, who lost his medical license in the wake of his legal troubles, had agreed to a plea deal with prosecutors for reduced charges. Bonano pleaded guilty to 1 count of attempted criminal possession of a weapon, which stemmed from the firearm found in his friend's vehicle on the night of his initial arrest. In October of 2021, he was sentenced to 5 years of probation. Today's topic was requested by Claire Sayers and Sofa Bandit. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jeffrey Kim. 18-year-old Emmeline Nguyen was scheduled to undergo a chest augmentation procedure on August 1st of 2019 with cosmetic surgeon Jeffrey Kim. He operated out of an office in Greenwood Village, Colorado, and had garnered a reputation as a trustworthy medical professional. On the day of her operation, however, Nguyen stopped breathing shortly after Kim's assistant had administered the anesthesia. The nurse then attempted to manually ventilate the teenager, but about an hour later, she went into cardiac arrest and became unresponsive. Kim and staff tried reversing the anesthesia by injecting the patient with various medications, but she never regained consciousness. As was later detailed by investigators, Kim neglected to call 911 for at least 5 hours since Nguyen had initially stopped breathing. By the time emergency responders arrived at the scene and transported her to the hospital, the teen had already suffered severe brain damage. Nguyen remained minimally conscious but was unable to speak or walk for the next 14 months. Then in October of 2020, she passed away as a direct result of the medical complications caused by her botched surgery. In February of 2022, Kim was formally charged in connection to Nguyen's death. Court documents indicated that he faced multiple felony counts, including negligent homicide and reckless manslaughter. Kim was released from custody on a $5,000 bond shortly after turning himself in to the authorities. The anesthesiologist involved in Nguyen's operation was also charged, according to the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. Number 1. Ingolf Church. Shortly after 4:30 a.m. on May the 15th of 2020, Ingolf Church texted his friend a message which partly read, "I am sorry, but she is a vindictive devil." The text, as the police in Dover, Massachusetts, would soon learn, was in reference to 58-year-old Church's wife, who was reported missing later that same day. Investigators located both of the couple's vehicles at the Residence Inn in Dedham, where they ultimately found Church with several cuts on his body and seemingly unresponsive in one of the rooms. While he was being treated at the hospital, the following day the man confessed to strangling his wife during a drunken argument at their Dover residence. Upon realizing that he'd accidentally killed her, Church had panicked and ended up dumping her body in a nearby pond. A state police dive team was later called to retrieve the victim's remains from the water. There were reportedly rocks found in her pants at the time of her recovery, which Church had used in an attempt to make her body sink. As was detailed in a police report, the couple had been involved in a number of domestic abuse incidents over the course of several months. During one of their rows, Church had allegedly choked his wife until she nearly lost consciousness. The suspect, who was ultimately charged with murder, was a renowned Boston area urologist who'd risen to prominence by specializing in the innovative practice of robotic surgery. It later emerged that a couple of months prior to his arrest, Church had lost his job after neglecting to see any of his patients for over a year. Around that same time, his wife had filed for divorce only a few days after she'd brought the allegations of abuse to the authorities' attention. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a cavity filled without anesthesia or have to do a mile-long fire walk? Let us know in the comments section below.